tariffs are a terrible mistake. They don't work. They will lead to higher prices. They are a tax, and they have historically been bad for our economy.
The global economy is fundamentally different today than it was yesterday. The system of global trade anchored on the United States that Canada has relied on since the end of the Second World War, a system that, while not perfect, has helped to deliver prosperity for our country for decades, is over.
Donald Trump's presidency has completely fallen apart. It is over. It is a disaster, and there is no way it will ever recover. It will only get worse from here. I know it. You know it. And even Donald Trump knows it. He knows he has completely failed. He knows his approval rating has tanked. He knows that it is over for him, so much so that he even is now screaming it on late night calls about how upset he is, and we are going to get into those leaked calls. But before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way, and it really does mean a lot to me. Now, there are a couple of reasons why Donald Trump knows his presidency has absolutely flopped and people hate him. So we are going to get into those for a little bit of context before we get to this breaking leaked story. First, let's start with the person who called Donald Trump out in the most brutal way today. That was Mark Carney.
The global economy is fundamentally different today than it was yesterday. The system of global trade anchored on the United States that Canada has relied on since the end of the Second World War, a system that, while not perfect, has helped to deliver prosperity for our country for decades, is over. Our old relationship of steadily deepening integration with the United States is over. The 80-year period when the United States embraced the mantle of global economic leadership, when it forged alliances rooted in trust and mutual respect, and championed the free and open exchange of goods and services, is over. Well, this is a tragedy. It is also the new reality. We must respond with both purpose and force. We are a free, sovereign, and ambitious country. We are masters in our own home.
Things in the global order have shifted dramatically. Donald Trump claimed that tariffs were being imposed because Canada posed a national security threat, which was a complete lie about fentanyl that anyone with basic common sense could see through. However, now Trump has created a real national security threat. We are losing our allies, both in trade and in partnerships, with many of them turning to China. This is the true threat that Trump has brought about, and it has reached a point where even his most loyal supporters are beginning to turn against him and calling out how disastrous this plan is. Just take a listen to Ted Cruz right here.
Look, I think it is a mistake to assume that we will have high tariffs in perpetuity. I don't think that would be good economic policy. I am not a fan of tariffs. And the announcement yesterday, look, time is going to tell in the next month or two or three what happens. If the result of yesterday's announcement is a lot of our trading partners across the globe dramatically reduce the tariffs they charge on U.S. goods and services, and the consequence of that is the U.S. government dramatically cuts the tariffs that were announced yesterday, that would be a great outcome. That would be good for America. If the result is our trading partners jack up their tariffs and we have high tariffs everywhere, I think that is a bad outcome for America. Tariffs are a tax on consumers, and I'm not a fan of jacking up taxes on American consumers. So my hope is these tariffs are short-lived and they serve as leverage to lower tariffs across the globe.
So Republicans are turning on Donald Trump over his tariffs. But of course, this isn't the only scandal that has rocked his presidency as of recently. Of course, SignalGate is still fresh in everyone's mind, no matter what Donald Trump tries to do to distract that. In these calls, this leaked call that I'm talking about, he is still angry, upset, and screaming about it, even though Carolyn Leavitt wants us to think differently.
You said case closed yesterday. As that case was closed, do you have anything that you can share about what was learned, how this can be avoided in the future, any sort of findings from that investigation?
The case is closed and the president continues to have confidence in his national security advisor. Yes.
Case closed. Really? Case closed. I don't think so. Carolyn, I don't think the case is closed. I think people still want answers. And there are reports out there that Donald Trump is still weighing the option of firing Mike Waltz, firing Pete Hegseth, getting rid of Tulsi Gabbard. This is a story that will continue because Donald Trump said that we were going to have a great economy and maybe a little bit of chaos here and there. That was a lie. We have a terrible economy, and it is constant chaos putting us in danger. Donald Trump knows that. It's why he's melting down in these calls. As we can see in this article right here, sobering reality for Trump as he rages at night to friends about negative press 70 days after his return to the Oval Office. Donald Trump is finding his second presidential term honeymoon collapsing as the administration officially makes embarrassing mistakes. Key allies turn on him, and more Republicans are publicly balking at. From policies, according to a report out of The Atlantic, the president is increasingly calling friends late at night to snarl about how things are going. As he realizes the sobering reality he is now facing, the reporter points out close aides to Trump admit that the president has been knocked off his stride as the SignalGate scandal put the White House in an awkward position, combined with the key Republicans beaking at his tariff policy, both of which have left him furious with people who are supposed to be his allies, that in turn had led to late-night angry phone calls. According to the reporter, Trump has recently taken to phoning allies late at night to complain about a series of negative stories. According to the outside ally in another person who has received such calls, he remains angry at National Security Advisor Mike Waltz for inadvertently adding Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor and chief of The Atlantic, to a Signal chat about the attack plans to strike Houthi rebels in Yemen. He has resisted firing Waltz so as to not be seen as giving in to the media, though he has fumed about Waltz having Goldberg's number in his phone. Add to that, he is angry that his bold move to end the wars in Gaza and Ukraine has floundered, as attacks have increased instead of tailing off, with that report specifically noting Trump has watched as a ceasefire in Gaza has been shattered, and as Vladimir Putin has refused to agree to the American terms to bring a temporary HAL to the fighting in Europe. The report adds that Trump was initially pleased with reports on his showy deportations of immigrants to El Salvador, but he was annoyed that friendly media voices, including Joe Rogan, questioned a lack of due process, and that the right-wing Pitt pundit and Coulter openly bet at the arrest of a Columbia University graduate student who led pro-Palestine protests, while the White House is hoping Trump's Liberation Day will get the administration back on track. Boy, is that not the case. One GOP strategist told this reporter, but recessions and inflation are politically devastating for any president. Trump is risking both with his trade wars, so it's understandably making his allies extremely nervous. It is all falling apart for Donald Trump, and he knows it. Every decision he makes is tragic. Everything he does backfires. This presidency is the worst we have ever seen, and we have already seen a Donald Trump presidency. He knows it, and his tariffs are only making things worse. And Lawrence O'Donnell did a great report on that I want to check out right here.
And Grover Norquist went crazy. And every Republican in the Senate and the House, including Mitch McConnell then in the Senate, claimed that the Democrats were crushing the American consumer with that increase in the gasoline tax. 4.3 cents. Newt Gingrich used it in his insurgent campaign to win control of the House of Representatives for Republicans in the next election for the first time in 40 years. And tonight, Newt Gingrich supports 54% sales taxes that Donald Trump is imposing, and 25% sales taxes that Donald Trump is imposing, and 10% sales taxes that Donald Trump is imposing on everything the United States of America imports from anywhere in the world. That 4.3 cent increase in the gasoline tax in 1993 was part of a complex deficit reduction legislation bill, huge bill, signed by President Clinton that included spending cuts and tax increases aimed at reducing the deficit, which is exactly what it successfully did. It was at the time the biggest tax increase in history, but that record has been broken. Broken by Donald Trump. Republican Mike Pence, who signed Grover Norquist's anti-tax pledge in order to win his seat in the House of Representatives, tweeted tonight, back in the 20th century, a nerdy right-wing Republican in Washington who never held elected office named Grover Norquist bent the entire Republican Party in Washington to his will. It was pathetic to watch. In effect, he forced them to sign a pledge to never vote for an increase in taxes of any kind. And every single Republican member of the United States Senate signed where Grover Norquist ordered them to sign. Every Republican presidential candidate signed where Grover Norquist required them to sign in order to be Republican candidates. And almost every Republican member of the House of Representatives signed exactly where Grover Norquist ordered them to sign, to never, ever, ever support an increase in taxation of any form. Republicans lived in fear of this guy, that guy right there in the middle. At the time, I declared Grover Norquist to be the most powerful unelected person in Washington because on one issue anyway, he had complete control over one of our political parties. Former Republican presidential campaign manager, my friend Stuart Stevens, wrote a book about the Grover Norquist-controlled Republican Party after Donald Trump was elected president, and he titled that book, "It Was All a Lie." It turns out Grover Norquist was and is a lie. Grover Norquist has revealed himself not to be a principled anti-tax crusader, as has every Republican member of the Senate and House of Representatives, because at some point, every single one of them has supported Donald Trump's increase in taxation on Americans through tariffs, which are sales taxes administered only on goods imported into this country and paid only by Americans in this country. Every one of those Republicans has either actively supported those taxes by Donald Trump or held their cowardly silence about them. And Grover Norquist, the nerd who was once perceived as the toughest Republican operative in Washington, is hiding tonight in his permanent cocoon of cowardly silence about Donald Trump's sales taxes, Donald Trump's tariffs. The last time the gasoline tax was increased in the United States of America was 32 years ago, with only Democratic votes in the House and the Senate. And Grover Norquist was outraged that Democrats, and Democrats only, voted to increase the gasoline tax in America. In 1993, the Democrats voted to increase the gasoline tax by 4.3 cents. And Grover Norquist screamed at the top of his histrionic anti-tax lungs about what a horrible burden an additional 4.3 cents a gallon of gasoline would be in America, what burden it would be for American drivers. And I'll never forget that outrage about the 4.3 cent increase in the gasoline tax, because I was working in the United States Senate at the time as the chief of staff of the Senate Finance Committee, and I personally negotiated that number, 4.3 cents, with the staff of a Democratic senator who was the final holdout on the gas tax increase, the final vote that we needed to get it through the committee. We actually started off by trying to increase it by a dime, but in the desperate last-minute negotiations to get that final vote in the Senate Finance Committee, the most I could get was 4.3 cents, which at the time was roughly a 2% increase in the cost of a gallon of gasoline. 2%.
It is no surprise that Donald Trump is once again crashing the economy. It is the only thing he did successfully in his first term. If Donald Trump was trying to screw us over, then he was successful. If he's trying to screw us over again, now I guess you got to hand it to him. He's good at crashing economies. He said he didn't want to be Herbert Hoover, but that is exactly what he is. Hopefully that means we get Democratic FDR in 2028 after this, but it is all a disaster. Clearly, Trump knows it, and we do too. That's why we have to call him out every single day. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video, and if you stuck around at the end, you can drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.